Good. It's good. We love it.
We do have our first speaker today too, which Jimmy will get to in a second. All right, let's jump in, Jimmy. We got a
All
lot of
right.
ground to cover.
Yep. All right. I just gave you share permission. You should be good.
Okay, thank you. All right, see the slides.
Yep. Perfect. Cool. All right. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to week 2. Thank you for coming back. Today, we're going to start getting into the real tactical stuff. I know last week was pretty theoretical. This week, we're going to actually write some code. And then next week, it's like full on, we're into it. So we're ramping up relatively quickly here. 2 quick goals today. Brandon's going to take us through a bunch of HTML and CSS, which is the foundation of websites. He'll talk more about that. And then I'm going to take us through Express as well as some kind of setup. We'll try to blast through that relatively quickly, but we'll start talking about how to actually build servers, which we'll kind of recap that. And then at the end, we're going to have Brendan Quinlan joining us, who was the CTO and co-founder of Aereo, which was Brannick's company, which got acquired by Zillow about a year and a half ago now. Is that right?
Yeah, about a year and a half ago. Yeah.
And so he's going to chat about his experience having gone from not knowing how to code, roughly 5 years ago to now leading a bunch of engineers at Zillow and, building the company with Brannick. So that'll be awesome.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
And just to, I think I'll let Brendan speak later on this, but when Brendan graduated college, it's probably fair to say that like everything you guys are learning here right now, same thing when I graduated college, we didn't know. And it was literally like over a course of 3 years, not only just learning this content, becoming an expert on it. Brendan now leads a team of over 30 or 40 engineers at Zillow and a massive division there, which is pretty cool. So like these are the building blocks to doing pretty big stuff. As a reminder, we've got all the notes on GitHub here. If you guys go to the GitHub page, you'll see this. I linked in last week's notes, recordings, etc. in the slides. If you missed them, I'll put in the week 2 once we have it after the call today. And then if you hit on notes up here and head down to week 2, the markdown file, that's MD, you'll see all the typed up notes for this week, which this is pretty basic HTML and CSS stuff. There's a lot of resources online, but hopefully this is a good punch list of the basics that you guys need to know. So with that, let's jump right in. We're going to pick up right where we left off last week with HTML. And there's going to be a lot of content, a lot of terms. I'll try to keep it high level and simple. Just know that like these are good foundational concepts to know. We're going to get a little bit into CSS. Most developers don't actually write CSS anymore. So like, don't be worried if it sounds like a lot. There's tools to help you do all of this stuff, and a lot of it's automated. I very rarely actually have to write that much HTML myself anymore. So we'll get through it. But yeah, let's jump in. So as we covered last week briefly, HTML is just text. It's what web pages are made up of. And every HTML document, that's what the whole page is called. So you load a web page, it's loading an HTML document. It's comprised of a series of tags or elements here. This is an element, so it's got an opening tag and a closing tag. You may recognize these little caret symbols. And then in between those is the content. So for example, this one, it says H1, that stands for heading 1. That is one of the most basic tag types or element types out there on the internet. I'm going to switch screens here. And on my left side, I've got my IDE set up. This is Cursor. It's VS Code. So this is where I write my programming. And then on the right here, I have a web browser loading a file on my computer. And it's just a simple HTML file. So here it is. You guys can see it, index.html. We can see right here, let me make this a little bit bigger. I've got a couple of tags. This is an HTML document, this structure you guys see. So up top, it says there's HTML. There's the opening tag, the bottom closing tags all the way down here. Then we've got a head section. This says things like, title, tells you the title that's up top. So you see up here, it says my page. So we can actually rename that. We could say Brannick's page. And then when we reload this, boom, up top it says Brannick's page. And then the bulk of what you see on the page is everything in body. So all the stuff in head here, these are like things behind the scenes. You typically don't see it. Everything in body, though, is all the stuff that you see. So we've got two tags on here. We've got an H1 and an H2. That stands for heading 1, heading 2. Remember, every tag's got an opening tag and a closing tag. It's super simple. The closing tag just has a / on the same name. And you basically build this big kind of tree structure up on a page of these. As you might imagine, there's an H1, an H2, an H3. There's all the way down to H6 in terms of heading types. So I made this little table. These are some of the most important tag types that you guys will see when you're looking at websites or building websites yourself. We talked about title. That's that header up here. Body, that's where all of your content goes. You've got header tags. P stands for paragraph. This is a pretty common one. So, if we want to add a bunch of text, paragraph text is here. We'll see that get added to the page. And that's more standard styling. And this is just plain. It doesn't look very fancy or anything. That's because there's no styling here. CSS is the styling element. So CSS is how we make things look cool and look sleek and modern and all of that. So that's the P tag. We've got a few others here. I'd recommend going through this table later and playing around with it and learning them. These are all just your kind of basic building blocks of the internet. I'll touch on a couple others though. We're going to skip over that. And the first one we're going to touch on is called divs. Divs, I think it stands for dividers, is one of the most common blocks. You make divs all day long. This page that I'm looking at on Google here, Jimmy, how many divs do you think this page has?
Hundreds, if not thousands.
Yeah, probably thousands of divs on this. A div is like a box, basically. It's a square. So if I go ahead, let's add a div here. Div, and then my browser, my coding thing adds the closing terminal always, or just automatically. We'll say first div, and then we can go second div. And let's reload that page. And they get added. It looks just like text. So everything inside of it gets rendered just like text. And if we inspect this page, which if you guys remember last week we covered, and that is just coming into the browser here and right-clicking and then hitting inspect, we can actually see, if we hit this little cursor icon, we can hover over on here and we can see the different things. You guys notice on the right side here, we've got the same HTML document I've got on my computer. So you can do this on any website in the world and you can go check it out. But you'll notice the div goes all the way across the page widthwise. So it takes up a full row on the page is that box, and then it's got the content in the middle. Same with that second div here. A lot of websites, HTML is like a tree structure. So you guys study node trees and things in class. You can nest div elements together. So I can go multiple divs deep, and I can say, hello world. Down here, I've got 3 layers of divs now. It seems like, okay, what good are these divs? But pretty soon you guys will see how these are the building blocks, quite literally, for most websites out there. And you'll see if we hover back in here, there's nothing, like they don't take up any space, right? It just shows the content in there. So even though there's 3 divs on the page, it doesn't look any different than what we had with 1 div. So that's divs. If you have any questions on any of this, or I'm going too fast, just put something in the chat, but we're trying to make it through to the fun stuff at the end of the class. So I'm going to keep the pace going. Next, we have spans. Spans let you send things side by side. Now, there's a lot of ways to do this. Spans is one of the earliest ways on the internet to do this. There's a lot of more modern ways to do this, which we'll cover a little bit of in this course. But let's just go ahead and make some spans and show you guys how that works. So we'll do span 1. Let's do span 2. You guys will see I misspelled it there and it tried to close it for me. And then let's do span 3. And then let's go ahead and reload that. Check it out. We've got 1, 2, 3 side by side now. If we hover over that, we can actually see how each one of those spans take up that much space side by side on the page. We could put these spans inside of a div. You can put all HTML elements inside of other HTML elements. Sometimes it'll look weird, but you could definitely put them there anyways. Let's reload that. Boom. It still appears just in its own div now on that row. And you can kind of expand out that tree structure I'm talking about in your browser here. That's divs, that's spans. Every website is built with these 2 building blocks pretty much. And also you'll notice that like paragraph text in the P tag, it looks just like what it looks like in a div. Some people don't use P tags. They just use paragraph text everywhere. There's sometimes no rules. It's kind of the Wild West when it comes to the internet. So you can kind of mix and mash things, and there's like no right answer. But if you're trying to follow the spec, it's usually good to put text and things inside of a p tag or a heading tag. And when websites like Google go out and they search the internet, you've got a computer reading the page. Google's going to look through your article or your blog or your website. It's going to be like, what is this page about? And they're going to look for these heading tags to say, oh, we've got a block of content underneath this. This content is about this subject. So it helps tell computers and bots and AI agents what's actually going on in your website if you adhere to these kind of structures. And it's just like you're writing a paper. You got headings, paragraphs, breaks, etc. You're just trying to lay things out logically. And it's also helps it for you to keep track of what's going on your web page. All right. That's divs, spans. Now we're going to cover attributes. So attributes are things that we can add within these tags. I'm going to start with an ID attribute, okay? So we've got our first div up here. Attributes go after the first tag name and before that first little caret here. And you can type it in. It's a key value pair. So the key comes first, and then you do an equal sign, and then double quotes, and then this is the value. So ID is the key, the value is value here, and you wrap that in double quotes. It's this key value pair. You could add an ID to every HTML element on your page. And IDs are unique. So you have to make sure that an ID, this is unique to this one here. This helps you keep track of things. So you guys are going to learn a little bit of JavaScript later on. You'll see that we're going to say, hey, go to this page and find the div with the ID of 24 and change the color of it. Well, this will let the computer go find this div versus knowing, is it this div or that div or a different div? I think we got a question there, Jimmy.
Yeah, I answered that in the chat, but it's probably good saying it out loud. Good question on when do we use divs versus spans. Kind of up to you. Like internet, like Brandon said, internet's like the Wild West, but there's a few subtle differences, but generally they're both containers. You'll see websites usually use divs over spans, but the majority of the time.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever really used a span personally. I use pretty much divs for everything. There's a few ways that you can get divs to go side by side, which we can touch on if people are curious, but we don't need to cover right now. So this is an attribute on this HTML element here. If we reload, we might be able to see it. We can see it up here. And I don't know if we can actually see attributes, properties. There's a whole lot of attributes behind the scenes that your browser keeps track of, but you'll notice the ID is down here. These are all these other things that they keep track of that we'll eventually get to. Most of them don't matter too much though. So ID is one, doesn't do much, just lets us identify a div or any HTML element on the page. Some of our others are things like classes, which we'll touch on in a second. Others are like source. So let's cover source. I think this is a pretty good one to cover. One of the HTML tag types is called image. And an image tag actually does not have a closing tag. So I kind of lied earlier when I said that every tag has a closing tag like this. That doesn't actually exist. There's a shorthand for it when it comes to images, and it's like this. So you just make the one tag and you put that / after the image, img here. That's our closing tag. And I've got a URL down here. Let me grab this URL. 1 second, guys. Okay, let's just grab this. And they have an attribute for an image tag called source. And this is what we're telling the browser. We're saying, hey, we want you to add an image in HTML to the page, and the source of that image is this URL. Let's go ahead and reload it. And there we go. We got a little placeholder. Jimmy, do you have a better placeholder URL for me?
I can find one. I can find a real image.
Yeah, find me a real image. Let's actually go to Boston College. Let's just Google this for you guys. Let's take this image and check this out. We're going to right click on the image and we're going to hit copy image address down here. And let me just look in a new tab. Here's the image. So we're going to take that URL for Boston College and we're going to come back and let's replace that with the source right here and reload the page. We now have an image on our page. So this is a pretty important building block, obviously, for images on tags. You can start to see how things get together. There's a whole lot of these media types. There's video as well. Those get a little bit more complicated, but image is a kind of fun one. And we'll probably do a project where you make your own little profile page and have you guys post it online and show them off. So let's see here. That is images, and that's where we use that source tag. Another common one, when you're on a website, you want to have a button, right? You sometimes want to link out to other pages. So a button, you could just define a button just like that. You can say click me, and then let's reload. And there the button is down here. You'll notice it's kind of showing next to the image though. So maybe we put that in its own div and put it in its own row. So I just cut that there, and let's get that spacing nice and right. And there it is. The button is underneath the image now in its own div. Another fun type to do is, what was I going to show? Links. This is the other most common one we want to cover. Oftentimes on a website, you want to link out to something else, right? So we do links with an A tag. It's just the letter A. That's it. You got an opening tag and a closing tag. And then we have something called href in here. So the key value is href. And then we enter into the double quotes the URL that we want to go to. So let's go to bc.edu. Let's reload that. And then your link is displayed here. So there we go. We get the classic kind of link. We click on that, it opens up Boston College's website for us here. Super simple, but super powerful. And when you think about a website and navigating it, right? Like let's go to bc.edu. Every little thing on here, like this, see I can hover over this and click it? That's a link. So let's go ahead and let's inspect this page. I hit right click, I opened up inspect in Chrome. I'm hovering over this element, and let's see in here. Check this out. What do we have? We have a div. It's got a class of article block. Can you guys see this all right? Let me know if you need me to make it bigger. We've got a div, and then there's an A tag in here. Look at this. They got an A tag, and then there's a URL that goes to the article. And then they actually put inside of that A tag, they put another div, and then they put an image. So you can see they wrapped this cover image and this little content down here in a link. So this whole thing is linked. So you can click anywhere on this and get it to work. So let's go ahead and try doing that now with our image that we have. I'm going to go ahead and just take this starting tag that we have here. I'm going to move it up top. I'm going to say it's going to be up there. And then we've got now inside of this link, we've got an image and the button down here too. So let's go ahead and reload it and see what happens. And now if I click on this image, oops, there we go. If I click on this image now, it should link out to the website, and it links out. You can see with these building blocks, you can kind of start to compile up a website. Sometimes if you break things, right, it might load funny. So let's see if that loads. It kind of tries to load it. So you really can't break anything though. So it's fun just to play around with. And I swear to God, I've spent so many hours of my life writing. You write like thousands of lines of this stuff, and then you're just missing like one closing tag somewhere like this. And like you just can't find it, or you added an extra one and like the whole page is just a mess. So it's kind of funny, but it's, you got to be careful as you're doing it just to keep track of it. And you'll see my spacing kind of goes down so you can quickly see what's going on the page. All right, so that is HTML basics. I'm going to cover super fast now CSS basics here in like 5 minutes, which does not do it justice, but I think we'll send out a link to a little tutorial that you guys can watch on CSS, which is pretty. There's a lot of tutorials out there. You don't really need to know that much on it. We'll just go through the basic concepts. A lot of people don't write this stuff anymore. There's packages that will help add styling automatically, which we'll also show you guys eventually here. But this is the style tag that we talked about. So the style tag lets us write CSS right onto an HTML element. So let's go ahead and on this div area up here, let's add a style tag. So style is my key, equal sign then, and then we get double quotes. Then our value is going to be, we're going to add some attributes that are relevant to CSS. And one of those attributes is color. So this is, again, key values. So you go color, colon, value. We're going to do red. And my little thing gives me a little red color there. And when I reload this now, you'll see that 1, 2, 3 over here are now red. And you can type in any color you want. Go black, go back to black, go blue, go blue. I think you even need to go indigo, and it'll do indigo. So you can do pretty much every color in the world. So we've got that text there. We can also do font size. So let's say we do font size, and then the key here is font dash size, and then you have a colon, and then the value is going to be 24 pixels. So that's going to be the actual size of this. And then you use a semicolon to separate out all these different things that you have. So this is one attribute for CSS. This is another attribute. They're separated out by that semicolon. And we'll see that made it bigger. So we now have bigger text on the page that is in purple. So there's a whole lot of these. I put some of them in the slides for you guys so you can check them out. Here's another table of them. Things like color or background color, border styles. The most important ones we'll touch on, the last section of this, is content, is padding and margin. So those are the most two common things that come up for people. So this chart here, this is a good chart to memorize. I memorized it early on. The content that we see here is the actual text. So let me open it up in the browser to show you guys. The content, 1, 2, 3, or let's go paragraph text. You guys see this? Paragraph text. The content is that blue box. You see that blue box that's highlighted? It's the smallest thing. It's this little blue area right around the text. That yellow area there, that's the margin. So if we click into this and we go to styles, let me just adjust my little window. You'll see down here at the bottom, we can actually see we've got this. So here's the content in the middle. Outside of the content, you have an area called padding. Then you have a border, and then you have margin. So let's go ahead and let's add in a little bit more padding and margin around this. So we're going to say style tag equals double brackets. We're going to enter our value. So our value is going to be padding, colon. So the key is padding, colon. And then we're going to add 20 pixels of padding. Then we're going to add a semicolon. And let's reload it. We'll see that this now is spaced out. And check it out. We've got 20 pixels of spacing all the way around this paragraph element now. So it's spaced out from the other elements. So that padding goes right on top of that. We can also add a border. So let's go border, colon, solid. That I add a border around this now. We can change the border color if we want. So we can do border dash color. And you can go blue. And these things you just learn over time. I kind of just, you memorize them as you do it. You can always Google though and look it up. I'm always looking at a cheat sheet for how to do certain things. And the last one here is margin. So we can add 20 pixels of margin. And margin actually surrounds the whole thing. You'll see it goes content in the middle, then padding, then your border, and then the margin around it. And these are your different layers of spacing. You can apply margin and padding to pretty much every HTML element there is. And this is how you can start to move things around on a page, and you can have the pages start to take a more advanced shape. I will pause for a second here. Any questions on any of that? A lot of content, I know, kind of brain dumping on you guys, but this stuff it's very basic. Once you get used to the terms and how to write these things, it'll make a lot of sense. And again, these are just the building blocks until we get to do the fun stuff of making applications, which we'll get to very soon. But even look at this. I bet if I showed this to you guys on the first day of class here, it would look pretty scary or kind of confusing. But even just looking at it now, hopefully you'll start to see, all right, this is just HTML elements. We got different tags and different key value pairs for some of those. You got to kind of look up what's what. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. So with that, I'm going to skip over class names. We'll maybe cover that on a future class for 10 minutes or so. But I'm going to hand it over to Jimmy, who's going to talk a little bit about Express. And Express is going to let you guys build your own web apps on your computer. It's going to be a package that we install. So we're going to get back into GET requests and POST requests and some of that stuff that we talked about last week now. And we're going to start then bringing them together. So you can make a website that renders HTML with GET requests and all these other things.
Perfect.
Jimmy, take it away.
All right. Let me share my screen. So we are going to chat about Express. And the first thing we need to do is we need to get Node and NPM installed on your computers. So do we have a Brave volunteer who wants to share their screen to walk through this? The problem is none of us are able to test this because we all have Node installed on our computer already. So we need to maybe troubleshoot this live really quick. Does anybody
I think we could put Charlotte on the spot. Charlotte, if you want to go on the spot, I'll give you a minute, maybe, if you're okay to share your screen. And we'll show you guys how to do this step. If not, we'll send out a tutorial video.
Yeah, we'll skip this if we need. Let's see.
Okay, she's on her phone.
Charlotte's on her phone. All right, so that won't work. We can't do Node on the phone. That's okay. We have somebody else who said I probably installed it, but can share mine. Do you know if you have installed it? Do you want to here? Let me send you a command really quick to test if you've installed it. Just run node-v and let me know if it comes up with anything. This is pretty much the only installation thing we'll have to do this course, so just bear with us here as we help people get set up.
And Aman is going to set up a class little meetup on campus, so I'll let him email out everyone, but where he can help you guys get it set up. He's already got it installed, Jimmy.
Yeah, you've got it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put these instructions in the Zoom chat. And you guys can do this. You can run these commands, and I'll show you the terminal in a second. So I'll show you how to actually run these commands. But let me just put these in here really quick. These are each individual line is one command, and that'll make sense in a second. Okay, that's for Mac. And then for Windows, we got these guys. Okay. All right. If you don't know what the terminal is, that's totally cool. The terminal is a way that you can use your computer to interact with Node, command line command line apps, which we'll talk about later. But it's basically it's a way to interact with programs and processes on your computer, of which the server is one, right? So you're going to run this thing on your computer. It's going to spin up a server, and then you need some way to interact with it, start it, stop it, debug it, right? That kind of thing. Brannick, is there any better explanation for a terminal? I'm trying to conceptually a way to think about it.
You guys know on your computer when you open up Finder and you're looking for a file, your terminal is just like that. It's just you just use text instead of dragging and dropping windows. So it's basically if you're a nerd, you use terminal. Otherwise, you can just use Finder.
So every computer has a built-in terminal. I apologize, I don't know how to do this on Windows, but I'm assuming it's somewhat similar / easy. On Mac, you open up your Spotlight here and just search for terminal, right? And that's going to open up a window that looks something like this. Yours might be white. It probably won't have these characters, but it'll generally look the same.
You make it a bit bigger there, Jimmy.
Yeah.
See the lines.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so a few quick commands. So the way that you interact with the terminal is it's all command-based. And so the first command that you can run is ls. And ls is going to show you things that are in your current directory. Another command, pwd, that's going to show you the directory you're currently in. So the way the terminal works is when you have a session and you have a window here, you're inside of a directory. I'm going to show you a command in a second that shows you how to navigate around those directories, but that's how you can see where you are. So the next command is cd, which stands for change directory. If you've started here, and you want to get to a folder called developer, you would type cd developer, or same with desktop, right? If you wanted to get to your desktop, you would type cd desktop. Oops, there we go.
And Jimmy, can I say something really quick?
Yeah, please.
So if you're doing this, and it might be a little intimidating, but you can open your Finder, and whenever you would click, like let's say you open Finder and you want to go documents, you would click on documents. That's the same thing as putting cd documents in. So you can follow it step by step with Finder, as Brannick was telling you. But this is just like the text-based version of that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, really good clarification. Yep. Cool. Anybody have questions on this? I'm going to pause here for a second because this is pretty important. The terminal is going to be the foundation for pretty much everything we do from here on out. Okay. All right. Just put them in the chat if you got questions. All right, so here is what we're going to do now. So I have Node and NPM installed already, but again, you'll go through these instructions, hopefully. Node is it's a package that helps you run servers. It's a little more, it has lots of functionality beyond that, but in the way that we're going to use it, it's how we're going to run our Express server. You've also heard us use this term Express. Express is what's called a framework. So if you remember last week when we were talking about how to view the requests, the underlying requests that are happening on websites, right? If we open up our developer tools here and hit network, and let me just refresh, all of these requests are going back and forth to the server, right? Hopefully you guys remember that. One thing you might have remembered me saying is the format of this request is very particular. You've got to have the HTTP status type or the verb. You've got to have the URL. You've got to have the body formatted in a certain way. It would be super arduous and overly complex to expect that every developer, every time they wanted to build a server, kind of reinvents the wheel on how to format those requests, right? And so instead, what frameworks allow you to do is they give you a much nicer interface for building a server that doesn't require you to memorize the intricacies and kind of the arcane format of the response type itself. It makes it just really easy to return the data, accept the data, whatever it is you're trying to do, and it handles all of the intricacies of building the server itself. So that's what Express does. Node is the tool that we're going to use to run Express. Express is the server. And then NPM is a package manager. So we need some way to install Express. NPM is what we use to do that. And we'll probably, throughout the course, we'll have many NPM packages, but NPM is what's called a package registry. So developers, just like you, just like us, can create a package that other developers can use, and they can publish it on NPM, right? And then other developers can use NPM to pull that code into their code and reuse it. So 3 core concepts there, right? And I know this is a lot, but Node is how we're going to run the server. Express is the framework that's going to help us build the server easier. And then NPM is the package manager that's going to help us install the server. Brannick, anything to add there? Make sense? Cool.
No, if you guys are confused, it's okay. Honestly, I never know how any of that stuff works. I just get it working and I never touch it again. So
yeah, that's pretty much the key.
We'll get it installed on your computer. You'll be good to go.
You'll never have to do it again. Yeah. Okay. All right. We got something in the chat. Windows has inherent apps such as Terminal or Windows PowerShell. Yep. Okay, perfect. All right. So let me go back to my terminal. And I'm going to change directories into my developer folder, which is I think I installed this folder or I made this folder myself. So you may not have developer, but you can do this anywhere. You can do this on your desktop, in your downloads, any folder you want. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new folder, right? I want to make a directory to host and to hold this server that I'm going to make. So we can see in here, we've got this command mkdir. That stands for make directory, right? So if I type make directory and then the name of my folder, let's call it Jimmy BC Web Apps, right? And hit enter. It looks like nothing happened, but this is kind of a quirk or like part of the terminal itself, right? It doesn't really give you status of things unless it's a particular tool that's been built to do that. Generally, most commands just return with no text, which means that they generally worked. So if I were to do cd, well, actually, first, if I were to do cd on a folder that doesn't exist, then I'm going to get an error, right? It's going to tell me, nope, I can't change directory into something that doesn't exist. But if I do change directory into the folder I just created, I get no response. But if I type pwd, you can now see that I'm in that folder. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. All right. So now that we're in that folder, and I'm going to hit Command K there to clear my terminal, just to keep it clean. Now that we're in that folder, we need to install a node package. So we need to install Express, and we need to tell kind of our code base that this is the folder where we're going to host the information for our server. So the way that we do that is we type npm, that's that package manager, right? Stands for node package manager. Init, so for initialize, right? Start something. And then -y tells it to just not ask you any questions and to just create the project. Again, this is something you do once at the beginning of starting a new project. You don't have to memorize this. You can always look up these commands. Okay, npm init -y. All right, so this is a command line tool that does actually return something when it's ready to go, right? And in this case, it tells us I wrote to this path right here, Jimmy BC web app / package.json this content. If I now do ls in this folder, this is going to show me the files that are actually in this folder, right? All I have is package.json. Package.json is what's called a manifest file or a configuration file that tells NPM how this folder should work. You don't really need to worry too much about what's going on in here. There's lots you can dig into and the kind of the spec for it's online, but just know that this is what holds the settings for this server now. All right, so now that I have this, I need to install Express. So now it knows, now the computer knows, hey, this folder is now a folder that's going to hold a server. And now I need to tell it, you're going to use Express for the server. And so we do that by running npm install Express. So I'm going to do that. And
at this point that you just look like a badass too on your computer. It's like stuff's installing. It always looks awesome.
Yeah, you got progress bars. You got people thinking you're like hacking. Yeah. So what that just did is that added 69 packages and it audited 70 packages. But basically what that means is I asked it to install Express. Express as a package also has its own packages that it has installed, right? And then those packages have their own packages that it has been installed, right? It's just like a tree all the way down. Express this, 69 packages for one command is actually, believe it or not, like on the lower end. When you get into like a really mature NPM and node project, you can have thousands of dependencies. They're called transient dependencies that have been created from just like the core 10 or 20 packages you wanted to add. All right. So now we are ready to actually write some code. Hopefully you guys have VS Code or some other IDE. I think last week we heard that VS Code seems to be the standard these days in CS classes. So if you don't, we'll put a link. Maybe Brandon can put a link in the chat for downloading VS Code. But VS Code just allows us to edit the code files, right? Like Brandon was showing, and Cursor is the other one we're going to use. So what you can do is, inside your terminal here, you can type code period. And that's going to tell it, hey, open up this code inside of VS Code, right? It's like a little extension that gets installed by VS Code. And now we can see we've got this, and we have all of our files and our packages that were installed with node modules and our package.json. All right, so now we have a project we can start working on. And again, you'll run this once at the beginning of every project and then never again. So this is an upfront kind of cost that you pay. The next thing that we need to do is we need to actually tell it what it's going to run. We need to give it a file that it can run. And so the way that we're going to do that, I guess we don't have okay. There's another command in the terminal called touch, and touch adds a file. So we've talked about make directory, change directory, list directory, PWD, which is path. Now we need to actually add a file to the directory we're in. So I'm going to, back in my terminal, do touch server.js. And if I hit enter and then go back to VS Code, we can now see server.js is inside this folder. You can also do this by right-clicking in the editor over here and just hitting new file. That's another way you can do this as well. All right. So now inside of server.js, this is where I'm going to define what this server is going to actually do. So in this case, I've got some example starter code for me here. We are going to do it this way. All right, we are going to import Express, and don't worry too much about this syntax yet, because we're going to give you some resources to keep exploring this. So I'll explain this in a second here.
And this code's all in the notes, so you guys can just hit copy in the notes, and then you can paste it on your computer.
All right, so if I do listen port, I'm getting some AI completion here, which that's next week's class, but we'll use it for now. All right, so what this code is actually doing, if we just read it kind of line by line here, let me increase this. The first line is importing Express. So remember, we pulled in Express from NPM, and we said, hey, we want to do something with this. Now in this file, we have to say, I want that package I just imported, or that I just installed. And so that's what this is doing. Then we're saying, give me an application. Express allows you to create these server applications, so make me one. And to do that, we are initializing the Express object using these two parentheses. And then we're specifying a port, and we're saying we want to run this app on port 3000. Don't worry too much about ports. Ports are kind of like routes, but for networking. So you can run multiple applications on your computer on different ports. Don't worry too much about the intricacies of it. And then finally, we need to tell this file Now that I've created my app, I want to start it. I want to listen for requests that are going to come into this app. And so to do that, I call app.listen. I give it the port. So I'm going to tell it listen on port 3000. And then this is just a console log saying that it's working. So this is a 7-line file right here that is a server. And this server could be deployed to the internet and could power a website, like the ones that we've talked about in the past. So back to kind of the whole thesis of the course, which is everything is text, right? Here's just an 8-line text file, 7-line text file that is a server and could respond to requests. So let's see what that actually looks like. If I go back to my terminal here. So the way you run this is you run node server.js. So if you remember, node is what we're using to run the server, right? So now we're calling node and then passing in that file. If I hit enter, this now tells me that the server is running on localhost 3000. Now, localhost is just a way of the application giving your website and your server a URL without it being on the internet. So if you're running something on localhost locally on your computer, right? If you were to send your friend this link and send them the localhost 3000 link and say, hey, look at the cool thing that I made, they wouldn't get anything, right? This thing is only running on your computer. Nobody's able to access it over the internet. There are ways that, to deploy the app, obviously, but then also to help with that. We might get into that later, but for now, just know if you see localhost, it's only on your computer. All right, let's open up Postman, which we talked about briefly last week. So here's Postman. You can see I've got a GET request to localhost 3000. Now, I haven't in my script, in my server here, defined anything to happen other than I want the server to start. So if I run this, I'm going to get something that tells me in HTML, I can't do that. There's no route that says that knows how to handle that request, right? So real quick, and I'm coming up on my time here and I want to leave time for Brendan, but real quick, let's add a GET route that actually sends something back to the client when you call that route. So you'll see that little code right here, app.get. Let me flip back. Okay. All right, so what this is doing is this is now saying, hey, application, when somebody calls the / route on this server, send a response back that just says hello world. Okay, so let's try that out. In order to try this, you have to actually quit your server and then restart your server. So to quit the server in the terminal, you're going to hit Control-C on Mac.
I don't think you do, Jimmy. I think it just works.
There's no HMR. It's only in frameworks. Okay, so then we'll rerun node server.js. And if I go back to Postman and run this again, now I get hello world, right? Just to illustrate really quickly, if I did change this and hit save without restarting, see, it still says hello world, right? So you've got to quit the server, restart it. There are some frameworks that will inject this automatically, but Express by itself is not one of them. All right, that's a ton of information between HTML and Express. We're going to leave you guys there for now, and we'll let Brendan kind of take over here. But we'll send lots of resources on this, and in future weeks, we're building upon all of this, right? This is the core of everything for the next 5-6 weeks. So,
Jimmy, pull up your code editor there quick.
Yep.
So you saw we added a GET route there. You could define the route. Next week, we're going to show you guys how to add other types of routes, so post and delete. And I think we're going to go ahead, and next week, you guys are going to build your first website, and we'll have you make your own profile page with HTML and your own routes. Kind of like, I don't know, what do you guys use nowadays for social media? I don't know. But kind of like a Facebook page or whatever, TikTok page, I guess. But super basic.
What are you doing? You're not even...
I don't know. We all use Facebook. That was big when we were in school. So we'll make our own little profile page that you guys can have your data on online. But thank you, Jimmy. And with that, I will. Oh, you guys use LinkedIn to chat. Nice. With that, I'll introduce Brendan here. Brendan, thank you for jumping on with us. Brendan is a good friend. He was my co-founder at Aereo. He went to Duke. I'll let him jump into his background and bio. But, the fun fact, I think that when I asked Brendan to do this and he texted me, he's like 5 years ago, Brendan had no idea what a route was. So that GET route that you guys just saw, he had no knowledge. So he's same spot that you guys are at right now today. And in the last 5 years, Brendan, you built the web infrastructure that now powers, 25% of all media in the real estate industry in the country and most of Canada.
Getting there.
Getting there. Yeah, it's getting there. So pretty cool how these things build pretty quickly. But yeah, Brendan, maybe you start off with your quick bio, where you went to school, what you studied, and then
Yeah,
we'll go from there.
For sure. Great, great to be on here with everyone. So I'm from Minnesota originally. I grew up with Brannick and we went to high school together. That's where we originally met. I went to Duke for undergrad. So unfortunately, I'm not a BC fan on specifically 2 days out of the year, usually when Duke and BC play basketball. I studied mechanical engineering, but through my mechanical engineering classes at Duke, got some exposure to CS and ultimately kind of fell in love with the iteration cycle that you can have with literally doing the exact workflow that Jimmy just did in front of all of you guys here, where you can, on your computer, spin up a web app locally and start iterating on ideas much more easily than I found I could do with hardware on the mechanical engineering side. So about a quarter of the way through my time at Duke, I added on CS as another major because I really wanted to dive deep, and ultimately that positioned Brannick and I well to then jump into things with Aereo and ultimately build that product. So we can jump more into that and talk more about Aereo, but that's the initial bio.
Yeah, and I mean, Brendan, you did both mechanical engineering and computer science at Duke. How well do you feel you were prepared after you graduated with the CS degree when it came to because I mean, we started working together that summer afterwards. Yeah. What was that like?
Yeah, the typical CS path didn't really give you the necessary exposure that ultimately you guys will get out of this class to just understand the fundamentals of how does the internet work? How do you build web apps? And then how do you actually get the foundation to apply any of the things that you were learning in your CS classes with object-oriented programming and kind of in anything in your, I don't know what your kind of course numbers are, but in like a CS 101 or 201 class. I never really had the sort of foundations to actually attach that learning to do useful things and to build products like you see in the world with the internet. So building the foundation that we have that you guys are getting here was that missing link. And once I established that, it was okay, now I can start to actually dig in and apply myself to building products. But I kind of was missing that kind of where I was lacking that kind of core understanding to know even where to start. So the short answer is no, I didn't really get that exposure. And so we had to learn some of this on our own.
Yeah. And we figured it out pretty quick.
Yeah.
How far do you think, I mean, right now, most of the kids are just learning everything for the first couple weeks, right? Yeah. You think of your average engineer, though, that you hire, and it probably sounds like a daunting distance, right? But maybe you could help people understand like what that distance is between what they're learning right now versus what people do on the day-to-day, whether you're building your own company or you're working for a company.
Yeah. The way that I'll answer this question is, so today I jumped in a little bit early to try to get some insight on what you guys are learning. We got a web server working locally on Jimmy's computer, but we also talked about HTML and CSS and kind of how you build an actual web page and kind of make those Lego bricks all work together. On a day-to-day, you're just doing more complex versions of that. As you kind of scale up here, you'll figure out how to kind of compile those Lego pieces together in more complex and interesting ways. But the foundations are here, and you're just scaling up your ability to apply those. So, and I think that the tell here is Brannick had his, you guys were looking at the HTML page that Brannick was building, but then you pulled up the BC website and pull up the web dev tools, and we're able to look at all the elements on that page. It's the same core kind of building blocks. You're just doing much more complicated things as you take on more complex products and projects that you want to build. So I think that the fact that you can go to any website on the internet, open your developer tools and see how it's built it should be a pretty good tell for you guys that yes, this is going to get more complicated, but what you're learning right now are those kind of core building blocks, and now you're just going to go and build more complex Legos or you know, however, whatever sort of analogy you want to use there.
Brendan, do you ever wish you went into just consulting or banking?
I was close. I was really close. But I'm pretty happy with where we landed. So and it goes back to those feedback loops of why I fell in love with CS in the first place. I mean, on the area side, we would have days where we would deploy new code to customers dozens of times. So that means that Brandon and I are sitting there with an idea. A customer is actively using the website, trying to get something done for their business, trying to do something, and we can go and make a change and then quickly deploy it and affect a change for them. And so those sorts of feedback cycles, I feel like are pretty unique to software engineering, and was something that I look back on what we were able to build for customers, and I'm pretty happy with the path that we chose. So,
Brendan,
Yeah.
Sorry, Brendan, go ahead.
Nope. Go for it, Jimmy.
So you manage engineers now, right?
Yeah.
And have managed engineers for a long time.
Yep.
And presumably certainly have hired engineers in the past. I'm assuming
Yep.
you're probably doing some hiring these days too. What do you look for when you think about like an engineer that is starting their career? What skills do you want them to have as somebody that is in charge of those hiring processes?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the key thing to frame with our hiring process is yeah, we've got the technical abilities, right? And you guys are learning those right now. But there are so many other things that are important for at least my hiring process when I think of the teams that we build. And it comes down to, like, there's kind of this thread that you're going to kind of get through all the responses here of you're building a product for users that people use. And so you're going to have to be able to have this understanding of what people actually want to do and how to build a good product for them. And so when we interview candidates, we're trying to suss out, not only their technical ability, but their ability to orient themselves with our users, kind of put on that hat and say, hey, in our case, we're building for real estate agents, brokers, and photography companies. So, hey, if I'm a real estate photographer, what tools do I want to be able to accomplish X, Y, and Z task for my business? And so there's this other element of the hiring process that's really oriented around kind of your behaviors and how you're able to problem solve and think through problems and present solutions and ultimately frame those from the mindset of your customers. So there's a couple other things, but I think that's a big sort of thematic theme of, right, you guys are equipping yourselves with a series of tools to be able to build solutions to problems that either you yourself are having, users, like other users of the business that you're working for are having, or if you guys go off to found your own companies, ultimately the users that you're trying to serve and appeal to with those products. So, only building the skill set's only half the battle. Then it's, okay, how do I actually apply that to do really great things? And so from our hiring process, that's a key piece as well of, okay, great. Like, you can write the best, you can build the best, Express-based web app in the world, but can you actually do productive things for users with it? And so that's the other kind of element here. And so I think for you guys, right, as you learn at BC, like you're in other classes outside of this context, you're refining that problem solving muscle, and now you're equipping yourselves with the tool set, and now you can bring them together.
Yeah, I think very well said. Two quick thoughts. One, if any of you guys have questions, put them in the chat here, and we'll let Brendan answer. And while you guys type out, hopefully we get a couple questions at least. Brendan, what do you think about all the AI stuff? Are you going to be out of a job in a year, or what do you think there?
We're big cursor users at Zillow. And we're also trying a whole bunch of different AI-based kind of either plugins or just full-on IDEs that like Windsurf as well. Are we going to be out of a job? No. It's driving efficiency across the org in pretty crazy ways. All of a sudden, your junior engineers are able to orient themselves in huge code bases much with much more speed. The learning curve is chopped down for a lot of those early entry level engineers. For your mid-tier engineers, they're just more efficient. And then for your kind of senior principal engineers, the folks that have been writing code manually for 15 years, they know when they look at a big code base, kind of how things should be structured and kind of how to architect really big complex features. And now they can use Cursor as an example to help expedite the process of building that architecture. So I don't think that we'll be out of a job necessarily here, but I think the output is just gonna kind of skyrocket here for the org. We're gonna be able to build more products with fewer engineers. We're gonna continue to invest in hiring engineers though. But the total aggregate of output of the org is gonna have some pretty significant step function changes relative to where we were at even a year ago.
Definitely. You got one question in the chat here. I'll read it out loud. Or Timothy, you want to read it or say it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my question was just kind of going back to your decision to go into software versus banking, kind of like what pushed you over the edge that you found like especially enjoyable about working in software.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple other points, the kind of direct interactions and access to the products that you're building for customers is that key first point. But there's a couple other considerations that I think are good. Your workflow in kind of the output that you're delivering. When I never did banking, but I have quite a few friends in banking, as I'm sure a lot of you guys do. So those projects are very ephemeral, right? It's hey, we're going to kind of take on this deal for the next couple months, deliver on the outcome, done, move on, right? And there's a kind of a sense of gratification with that and getting something done. On the software side, though, you can take a much longer bet and see your work compound over many more iteration cycles. And ultimately, I think for kind of yourselves, as you guys are trying to grow early in your career and build a skill set and kind of really refine that problem solving capability early in your careers, being able to look across a longer time horizon of a product is going to kind of help you make those, help refine that trade-off mentality of, okay, hey, we're going to try to solve this problem for today, but that's going to have trade-offs and consequences for decisions that we want to make next, and so on and so forth. And so when you're working on a product where you can take a quarter, 2-quarter, year-long, 2-year-long time horizon, you're able to kind of really refine that problem-solving mindset a little bit more than I think you'd be able to otherwise do when looking at kind of very short-term deals in a banking capacity. I think consulting, where you have a long-term partnership with a client, might be a little bit more akin to this style. But I really liked the fact that with Aereo, we were able to kind of sink in on a problem space for a while and understand that, okay, well, we want to do these really great aspirational things, but we got to deliver something great today. What trade-offs do we want to make now to deliver something first? And then what's that second horizon? What's that third horizon? How do we actually sequence things out? And it was just a much different sort of problem space for us to be kind of thinking in. And then ultimately, as a result of that, refine some of our professional tool set with.
You got a couple more questions in there. I'm going to answer Brendan.
Question on appreciation of candidates who have work experience or people who have started their own projects, whether it be little startups that they wanted to make or just building websites to get practice in. Yes, 100% appreciate candidates here. It showcases that other capability that I was talking about, right? Like when we do interviews and I give you a coding test and you crush it, great. like that, okay, that proves maybe your technical competence, but what can you show me that showcases that ability to show that problem solving and to be creative about the solutions that you're dreaming up? And you don't have to actually work at another company to do that. You guys can, as you guys go through the rest of this course and learn how to build web apps, I'm sure many of you might have ideas that you have for, fun web apps that could just solve a problem in your life, or otherwise do something interesting. Or if you don't have an idea, that's okay. Go build a little Instagram dupe, and kind of use that to help kind of train yourself and figure out what sort of great things can you build with software. And it doesn't have to be actually working at it doesn't have to be working at Meta. It doesn't have to be working at Zillow. It doesn't have to be working at a big tech company. Those side projects, on a lot of the candidates that I've hired, they put right on their resume. And then when we're in interviews, I then ask them about it, and we do a screen share, and they walk me through a project that wasn't necessarily sponsored by a tech company, but nevertheless was just something that they were passionate about building in their off time. So yeah, those side projects are key.
Not to usurp here, but I'll share one tidbit for everyone. One thing I think pretty much every hiring person looks at for engineering candidates is their GitHub profile.
Yeah.
So if you guys don't have a GitHub profile, go set up. Here's Brendan's. And the thing everyone looks at right away is these green squares. There's 365 green squares on each chart on a GitHub profile. Each one represents a day of the year. And if it's green, you push code on that. If it's dark green, you pushed a lot of code. You can check out 2021. This is when we were building Aereo. Brendan pushed code almost every single day of the year. Check out 2022. Same kind of story here. You can check out my past year. You can see I didn't do much work this past year, but I've been starting to write some code again. So make a profile. It's like your LinkedIn for engineers, basically. Just wanted to share that quick.
Yeah. So much so that it's pretty typical to link your GitHub account right on your resume if you're applying to software engineering jobs.
Well, I think we got one question, then we'll probably wrap up, Brendan.
Cool. Question on, in a world where there are more tech startups than ever, how do you separate yourself from the competition? This is an excellent question that I don't think I have a perfect answer to. It ultimately is the game of startups, right? But let me make a suggestion here, right? At the end of the day, you're building for customers, you're building for users that use your product. So find those problems and build solutions to those problems for people that need them. And if you do that, right, it's a little bit of a simplification, but that's the core of it. Too often we see startups that build a theoretical great product, and it's, oh, this sounds like such a great idea, but then you kind of drill in and you're like, well, but does anyone want this? Is anyone using this? Does this actually really solve a need that people have? And so I would kind of frame the question and approach a little bit differently, rather than thinking about all the other startups that exist out there. Right, your focus is not on the competitors. It's on your users and the people that you're solving problems for. And if that's how you kind of orient your mindset, well, then you're going to be able to figure out really quickly if you're successful, if you're able to kind of connect with a user problem with your solution that you're building. So I think that's how I would reframe it and recommend an approach. For us with Aereo, there were other competitors, and there were other companies that were trying to do similar things to what we ended up building. But in the very early days, we were on the phone with customers, trying to understand what are the real problems that they're having with their businesses, and building with those users, understanding the things that they needed to actually handle their day-to-day operations with their business. And then we were able to cater solutions to them and ultimately continue to build with time. But ultimately, you'll hear the term product market fit when kind of thrown around the startup community, but that really reigns true. It's how can you find the market, the customer for the product that you want to build, and that's really how you set yourself apart. All right.
Sweet. Thanks for coming, Brent.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Thank you all for coming back for week 2. Next week, we'll build out some web pages and get you guys coding a little bit more, which should be fun. And then, yeah, feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions. I'll email out the slides, the notes, the recordings, all of that stuff. If you guys have any friends that want to join, let us know, and we'll get them added. So hope you guys have a great week.
All right.
Thank
See you
you.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.